In view of the special relationship with Singapore, India has decided to allow the export of rice to meet the food security requirements of the Southeast nation. The Ministry of External Affairs said. MEA spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said that India and Singapore enjoy a very close strategic partnership, and in view of this special relationship, India has decided to allow the export of rice to meet the food security requirements of Singapore. India on the 27th of August introduced additional safeguards on exports of basmati rice so as to prevent exports of non-basmati white rice, which is presently under the prohibited category. So these, of course, are the big developments we are tracking for you. India deciding to allow the export of rice to Singapore. We are learning that this has been taken in view of the special relationship. So clearly, of course, this is something that the MEA has said has happened as India and Singapore enjoy a very close strategic partnership. In view of this special relationship, India has decided to take this decision. Sharad Kohli, economist, joins us for more on this story. Sharad, what explains the stand taken by India?
I think this clearly speaks about, as has been specified, that India cares for the food security of the South Asian region, which is in India's neighborhood. And it also shows the special relationships which India has, with Singapore for that matter. We saw recently, UPI being connected to Singapore in more ways than one. We also saw special treaties coming up with Singapore in the last few years, I would say. In the last few years. So I think all in all, it's an exception. As they say, exception proves the rule. So as a matter of rule, the export of non-basmati rice has been banned to curtail inflation, whereas for Singapore, an exception has been made. However, I would like to add a very important point here, that this exemption or this exception should not be used by other nations or by Singapore for exporting to countries. That, for example, if suddenly demand for rice export in India rises from Singapore, I think then eyebrows would be raised, because then there is a chance that we call something as entry port trade, that is, an order comes from Singapore and it is routed elsewhere. So I think the importers from Singapore will have to take care that they do not send it to any region other than the South Asian countries, because I am anticipating a food shortage around the world, which will cause a spurt in demand of Indian food grains, whether it is wheat, rice, or some of the others. So I think for South Asian regions, which is in India's neighborhood, is India's care for food security. India has been exporting about 7.33 MMT, called million metric tons of rice, out of which most of it has been curtailed except for Singapore. So I think this spells out very special relations with Singapore as far as rice exports are concerned, and as far as at the diplomatic level is concerned. Uday.
Sanjeev Srivastava, International Affairs expert, is also joining us now. Sanjeev, clearly, of course, this signifies a special relationship that India has with Singapore, which is why this decision has been taken, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Our relationship with Singapore today is a special relationship. Singapore is known as the pulse of the world. Singapore is a very, significant country, and it has contributed a lot to the international community with regard to offering a different perspective, a great model of governance, etc. And obviously, India enjoys a very close partnership with Singapore, and we try our best to help out Singapore in hours of requirement. So I think at this point of time, when Singapore is having this requirement of rice, we have decided to give them basmati rice, and additional safeguards have been taken with regard to that. So I think this clearly indicates that we want to maintain our special partnership with Singapore, and India-Singapore relationship is as bright as ever, and in the future of this relationship it appears that it's very good, and we will be collaborating more closely on several other sectors. Obviously, we are doing already our close coordination and collaboration with them, but yes, in times of need, when you come up to help out a friend, you prove that you are a true friend, a true partner.
Okay, let me go back to Sharad Kohli. Sharad, also, this shows, of course, that while India has taken a stand in view of our domestic interests, we are willing to barge, of course, when it comes to our global responsibility as well.
No, we are undoubtedly, Uday. But the point of the matter here is that with the risk of inflation, which is primarily due to food items, vegetables and food grains and some of the pulses, we have to take care that this inflation doesn't move up further, because we are in an election year, and I think no government at the state level or at the center would want a very, very expensive lot of food grains to be reaching the consumers. So I think, yes, India is concerned, and we have proved it in the past. We saw that happening when there was crisis in Sri Lanka. We saw that happening in the past. We've helped Bangladesh. We've helped so many nations. We've helped African nations so many times. So India does come forward to fulfill its global responsibility. As we all know, Prime Minister has given the Nara which says Vasudev Kutumbakam, which is one world, one family. The whole world is a family. And I think one nation has to look after the other. But at the same time, I think the domestic interest, the basmati rice, this rice export ban came out as a result of that. India has to protect its domestic interest also. So wherever India has, I saw a statement coming from Donald Trump that India is a tariff king. Now, India has to protect its domestic industry. India has to protect domestic consumers. India has to keep a check on inflation. So I think a nation-first approach would always be there for any nation. But at the same time, I think treating the global world as a family would also be there. So I think that is what this exception is revealing, that India has concern for South Asian nations, which are neighborhood. India shares very special relations. And we should not forget that when it comes to Singapore, we should see Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia. These are the nations where Singapore supplies rice from its own country, because Singapore doesn't consume the entire lot of rice itself. And India has special relations with. So instead of allowing all of these nations to import, what India has done is it has picked up a country with which it has special relations, which is an export hub, which is an international trade hub, which is Singapore. So from there, it will be exported to these neighboring countries. But as I said, this should not be misused to be a point of export for rest of that all of a sudden we see a lot of rice export happening in Singapore. I think India will keep an eye. I'm sure Ministry of Trade and Commerce is going to keep an eye on that, because that will tantamount to the same thing, that is exporting to the rest of the world. All in all, I think a very positive step, and a step which shows that India is not adamant with regard to its policies, even if it comes to domestic interest.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.